Hello folks. The Appalachian Mountains are old. Like, seriously old. Millions of years old. They're older than the Rocky Mountains to the far western parts of the country. They're older than a lot more taller, larger mountain chains. And they're very eroded. And that's how you can tell a mountain chain is old. But you know what's older than the Appalachian Mountains? The New River. And I know, how ironic. An ancient river calling itself the New River. Here, in this New River Valley in southern West Virginia, is I believe, our 5th national park. We've gone to Shenandoah, Cuyahoga Valley, Indiana Dunes, Gateway Arch, and now finally, here in West Virginia, we're exploring the Mountain State's flagship national park and the newest national park, New River Gorge National Park. Now, of course, why wouldn't I? To start off the video, I've chosen the most strenuous and difficult trail in this region of the national park. The region we're in the New River Gorge National Park, is called Grandview, and of course, by the name you can tell, you get the most grand views of the New River. I guess to compensate for this difficult trail, we're getting some nice views of the rock patterns and some of this very peaceful forest land that you can't really see from an overhead view of these mountains. The New River is a largely small river. It's a tributary of the Kanawha River that we saw last video in Charleston, which in itself is a tributary of the Ohio River. It is one of the most ancient rivers in the world. What you saw in that first glimpse of the overhead shot we took of this new river, that is the result of a few 100 million years of erosion. Originally, there was this Appalachian highland in this area of southern West Virginia, but over millions upon millions upon millions of years, the river started eroding away at the earth of these highlands. And this created these steep hillsides that you got to see in that first shot. As these pioneer settlers first developed this area, they used the natural resources that were here and largely untouched. The lumber in the trees and the coal that one would find deep beneath these mountains. And so there's a lot of industrialization. I wouldn't say urbanization. This place is far from urban, but this land was heavily exploited for its resources. And so the mountain folk who did live here, although they didn't really get to profit from the resources in this area, they did manage to eke out an industrial type of living here for decades in American history. And so because of just the significance, the importance of this area, plus the history behind it, this was designated as a national river. The New River. And only in the last year or so, I believe it was last year, this place turned into the newest national park. And that's why we are here today. We're here for 2 days, so we'll get plenty of time to see all that this park has to offer. Oh, look at that. Some nice geological formations. What's more, all the plant life here looks like something you'd find in some tropical jungle. A forested area, largely untouched. Alright, so we see a little bit more of a glimpse of that new river. As you can see, steep mountainsides, because that river has been eroding the mountainsides for millions of years. It is insane how geology works like that. Take a look at this. This is insane. It just looks like a bunch of stone bricks smushed together, but this is the product, the result of erosion, weathering. And I can sort of hear myself having an echo, because there is this little cave area. Like the rocks go up and they curve. Wow, it just keeps getting better and better. Leave it to West Virginia to constantly keep you amazed with its mountainscape wonders. What's up? I see how it is. It's all the animals, man. They just walk away. If you hear that sound of rumbling water, you'd be correct. There's a waterfall all the way down here. It makes sense. If there's a national park surrounded by a river, if its main theme is the area around a river, of course there's going to be waterfalls, and it's right there. But what does kind of stink is that to get to the other side, a little better view is going to be another 30-minute drive. A little bit more of a pain in the butt, to be honest. Frankly, it's not much of a view. When it's obscured by all these trees, and it's so far away, you can't really see much of it. There could have been better views than right here, so far away. I'd say with the naked eye, you could probably make out a good, nice view of the falls, but on camera, it doesn't really work that way. So yeah, this is Sandstone Falls. Sure falls short of a spectacular view, in my opinion. I have one more stop today on today's adventure in the new River Gorge National Park. It's not exactly in the park's territorial limits, but I think it has quite a lot to do with the culture, the lore of West Virginia, so I think it's important to stop by this place to conclude our video. Okay, I'm sorry, whoever suggested that I go to the Sandstone Falls Overlook, clearly mistaken, because the Brooks Overlook is where it's at. You can see literally everything, from the mountains and valleys to the real gorge of the new river, and you know, a bunch of trees and vegetation in between. But oh, actually, look, there's a small house even. This is more like it. This is the overlook that you all and I wanted to see. Now, isn't this just the essential Appalachian West Virginia experience? You know, the experience you think of when you hear of country roads take me home to the place I belong, West Virginia. This is it. This is the site. Let's get to our real last thing on our agenda today here in New River Gorge National Park. There's something about American tall tales which really fascinates me. Used as, I guess, stories to literature throughout the ages of American history, they do a really good job of capturing the nature of American culture in these stories. You might have learned about these tall tales early on in school, or have had family and friends tell you about these stories, whether it's exaggerations of real people like Johnny Appleseed in the Midwest, or fictional characters like Paul Bunyan in the northern forests and Pecos Bill in the western frontier. Stories like these are usually exaggerated, but they tell a story about certain American qualities of culture. One example of these American tall tales is the legend of John Henry. We are in the perfect place to talk about John Henry, the John Henry Historical Park, right outside of the Great Bend Tunnel, which is actually very close, not inside, but very close to the New River Gorge National Park. The interesting thing about these American tall tales is that because they are so far removed from what may have happened, they're subject to interpretation from various sources. Some people may say that this event happened in a tall tale. Some people may say that no, this didn't happen, this actually happened. But that's the fun thing. Americans all over, they share these stories and it becomes an integral part of their culture. So I'm not a great storyteller, but I can share with you all the story I grew up learning about this man, John Henry, who was, in fact, a real person, but the story is very exaggerated. So John Henry was originally a freed slave who, in the 1870s, began work for the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad. This was that main railroad which supplied a lot of the country at the time, a lot of coal from the Appalachian Mountains. And so as he worked, he met various people, and he became very well respected amongst his ranks. He was a steel driver, which meant he was working long, strenuous hours on the railroad. So that's not easy work, but he took pride in his work. And he also took pride in his fellow workers, because they all knew they were doing a very hard job, but at the end of the day, they took pride in what they were doing. And then came along technology. There was this new steam-powered drill, which supposedly would do the work of drilling a lot faster than a lot of other workers doing manual labor. And for these employers at the top of these businesses and industries, that was a good sign. That meant they didn't have to employ many people. Labor costs would plummet, which was good for them in their own personal business. This was bad, however, for those manual laborers like John Henry, who were in danger of losing their jobs and their livelihood. He ultimately challenged this new steam-powered drill to a contest, a race, to see whether manual labor or new technology was better for the construction of these railroads. In the end, he won this race. He outpaced the drill by a few feet and was considered the victor. This is where it gets sort of debatable, and people argue over what happened. Some people say immediately after, he collapsed, he exerted himself too much, had a heart attack, and died with a hammer in his hand. Other people say, no, he lived. He might have died from other job-related incidents. I mean, working on the railroad near tunnels, that was pretty dangerous. So he could have died there, or he could have just worked on other trades and passions of his for the rest of his life. That's the interesting thing about tall tales. It doesn't matter what is truth and what is not. The idea goes that this legend of John Henry symbolizes that true American spirit of working hard, having a sense of pride in what you're doing, and standing up for what you believe is right. And that's exactly what John Henry did here. So, that is the classic American tall tale of John Henry. Well, that's it. I have nothing more. Tomorrow, we'll get to explore a lot more of the new River Gorge National Park. Probably more iconic sites of this national park than today. So I'm excited for tomorrow. I hope you all are too. So with that being said, standing in front of this iconic John Henry statue, in front of the Great Bend Tunnel, right nearby New River Gorge National Park. More travels to come. I will see you at the next location.